after the other.
I would not refer him as a dictator.
Exposed, losing control and influence, powerless in the face of the people's power.
The people of Egypt, we hear your voices.
We ask, is this the dawn of a new Middle East? Is this the end of Pax Americana? This is Empire. Hello and welcome to Empire. I am Marwan Bishara. As popular uprisings swept through Tunisia and Egypt and the winds of change blew across the Arab world, the United States, the power that has long dominated the region, has been particularly absent. As its allies began to tumble, it went on to fumble each and every opportunity to bridge the gap between its rhetoric of freedom and democracy and its befriending of autocrats and dictators. Caught off guard, as millions of people poured into the streets and public squares of the Arab world, the Obama administration faltered.
The United States has a close partnership with Egypt.
President Mubarak has been very helpful.
And we've cooperated on many issues.
Equating between the dictators and the dictated.
I would not refer to him as a dictator.
But we're not picking between those on the street and those in the government.
Everybody wants a yes or no answer to what are very complicated issues.
And hedging its bets on authoritarian rulers and opposition parties alike.
We call on all parties to exercise restraint.
Those protesting in the streets have a responsibility to express themselves peacefully.
These are decisions to be made within Egypt by the Egyptian people. It is not for the United States to anoint.
And even when millions crowded Maidan al-Tahrir or Liberation Square, the Obama administration remained caught in the headlights.
There are deep grievances within Egyptian society.
And continued to play catch-up.
An orderly transition must be meaningful, it must be peaceful, and it must begin now.
The United States in this case was surprised, taken aback.
What we've seen is a gradual incremental change in tone as the administration has played catch-up with events in Egypt, which frankly I think have gone much faster, much more swiftly, much more dramatically than virtually anyone expected.
The Arabs have long been invisible to Washington, preoccupied with controlling the flow of oil, fighting communism, controlling Islamist movements, and supporting Israel.
The strategic interest in the Arab world is oil, Israel, and some form of stability where the flow of oil is not interrupted.
When America opposed the British and French colonial powers in Suez in 1956, it was supposed to be the beginning of a rosy post-colonial relationship with the Arab world. Alas, all too soon, America was seen as replacing colonialism with a new form of imperialism, supporting authoritarian regimes and defeating secular nationalists from Egypt's Nasser to Iraq's Saddam Hussein.
Dictatorship, authoritarian regimes are basically corrupt, oblivious to change, and oblivious to the interests and the rights of the population.
U.S. foreign policy has been obsessed with Israel, right or wrong.
Now, let me be clear. Israel's security is sacrosanct.
The Israel-Arab conflict is the axis of Arab-American relations.
The U.S. then turned its attention to the threat of so-called radical Islam, from Iran to Algeria to Lebanon and Yemen. In 2001, terrorism became the overarching priority. Arabs were once again marginalized by America's greater Middle East strategy. The Egyptian-born Al-Qaeda leader Ayman Zawahiri captured the headlines against the backdrop of mounting oppression in Egypt and the Mubarak regime cracking down on peaceful opposition under the pretext of the war on terror, promoting the idea of his son's succession at the heart of the republic. And when Washington began to speak of spreading democracy and freedom,
60 years of Western nations excusing and accommodating the lack of freedom in the Middle East did nothing to make us safe.
it was merely to justify U.S. military intervention in the region, making deals and embracing authoritarian regimes, ensuring their allegiance to Washington's war on terror and its sponsored peace process, with Egypt playing a key role on both fronts. The Obama administration pursued more of the same, preferring stability to democracy, albeit propped up by brute force.
The price of stability in many instances has been stagnation. Social, political, economic stagnation, impoverishment of the people.
Now those chickens are coming home to roost.
It's going to take a very long time to undo the damage that has been performed over a very long period.
With the genie out of the bottle, is it finally time for a change the Arabs can believe in?
Joining me to discuss the dramatic changes in the Arab world and their strategic implications is Professor Rashid Khalidi. You are a professor of modern and Arab studies at Columbia University and the author of Sowing Crisis, the Cold War and American Dominance in the Middle East. Seymour Hersh, you are a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, regular contributor to The New Yorker, and author of numerous books, including Chain of Command, The Road from 9/11 to Abu Ghraib. And Thomas Pickering, Ambassador, you are a former Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs from 1997 to 2000, long-serving U.S. Ambassador, including the United Nations, Israel, and Jordan. Gentlemen, welcome to Empire. Ambassador, let me start with you. What is it about you Americans that you're always shocked and surprised? 1956, you're shocked from Hungary. 1968, Czechoslovakia. 1979, Iran. 1989, Berlin. And now, Egypt, Tunisia, and so on and so forth. For a country that takes on the public and seriously and democracy seriously, you're always shocked by the power of the people.
The shock and surprise was certainly in two areas: timing and contagion. There is an eternal debate in the United States, and it's going on now, on American policy, between our interests and our principles.
So is it because you don't take your principles seriously abroad?
I think that it is true that any principled diplomat has a dose of realism, that the United States cannot go around changing every government every day in every way in the way it would like. It is true that the United States over the years has, I think, set a standard and appealed to people on the issues of democracy and freedom.
But
very, not so, beyond rhetoric too.
Professor Khalid Rashid, it seems to me that between policy of realism and that of so-called idealism, both proved to be a failure towards the Arab world, or actually towards the South in general. What's next for Washington then?
Well, I think the problem is that when the American public pays attention, it wants to see that American ideals are carried out. Americans are today watching Egypt, and they want democracy. They're with the people. And so we're seeing the administration beginning to try and catch up with that. But when policy is left to the practitioners, quite frequently, unfortunately, it's realpolitik. It's not so much principle, it's we need this from them, it's we want that from them, we want them to go along with Israel, we want them to follow us on Iran. And so you have a willingness on the part of the people who are not being watched by the American people and who are running policy to essentially work with whoever they have in power, whether it's a police state, whether it's a dictator or whatever.
Isn't it also a bit beyond that? I mean, the Arab that we see today in the streets of Tunisia, Yemen, and certainly Egypt has been invisible to American decision.
Well, that's because we've been sold a bill of goods. We have been told that these are people who are so unreliable they can't be trusted with democracy. So they need to have police states to keep them down. The Mubarak regime sold us this bill of goods. The Bin Ali regime, all of the dictatorships in the Arab world.
And also the American liberals about the captive Arab mind, you remember?
I won't even begin to talk about the American media and the degree to which there is a lemming-like chase, everybody chasing everybody else's tail, to talk about how backwards the Arabs are and how we're going to all be eaten up by the Islamic boogeyman if the secret police don't keep them down.
Seymour Hersh, D word, I mean, what's up with that? They can't say dictator?
talk about the failure of the American press at that moment when the vice president said, I wouldn't call him a dictator. The next question is, are you out of your mind? But of course,
there's two elements to that. So first of all, there is a special relationship between this client in Egypt and this administration or its previous administrations.
Egypt was a big player in the war in Gaza. This is Cheney-Bush. This is not Obama.
This recent war, 2008.
The 08 war, we worked very closely with the Egyptians on intelligence, and the real game was, the game that hasn't been talked about is we were helping the Israelis, and the Egyptians were